What's up, guys? Welcome back to Unlocked. So again, thanks for listening. Before we kind of dive in today, I want to remind everybody it helps a lot build our channel. Right now, only 54% of you are actually subscribed. So if you don't mind hitting the little bell, liking, subscribing, and help us just really share. It helps grow the channel so we can do more of these. So today I wanted to talk about, don't listen to the people that are in the room necessarily just because they're in the room. So let me explain. A lot of times, I remember being introduced to this about, checking the fruit in the tree and checking if people actually have the credibility to speak. And it's something that most people, I believe, are unaware more than the fact that they awarely do it wrong. So what do I mean by that is a lot of times we just access like our school, or maybe it's a room full of family members, or maybe it's a class, maybe it's a seminar I'm going, and just because I'm in a position of listening, maybe I'm on a stand, maybe I'm in a crowd listening to somebody from stage, I almost like assume the person from stage or the person speaking at the head of the table or the family member that's older, just because of their status, position, or maybe just because who they are emotionally to us, we automatically listen, therefore we believe that what they say is true. So I'll give you an example, and this is very dangerous specifically in business. If I walk in a room and I say, hey, you have the flu, you would be like, okay, what do you base it out of? But if I walk into a hospital waiting room and I'm wearing a doctor's, a white robe, and I have my little thing hanging to check your pulse, and I have like a doctor appearance, and I say, hey, I believe based on these symptoms you have the flu, me saying the same exact thing, changing the scenario and who I am gives me a lot more credibility, and now you're therefore more inclined to be influenced of what I say. Now, that could be very, very dangerous, because I could walk into a seminar, somebody could say something completely off topic or stupid from stage because they're sharing their one experience because they've never got a mic before, and they're sharing their one exception to the rule of how they made a sale. Now I assume that every sale I should make is like that, or even worse, I assume that every sale I have not made is because of that. So I think that you have to learn, or one thing I've learned that's helped me a lot is learning how to check the fruit and not be judgmental. So I need to listen, and I need to find out if the person that is speaking to try to influence me, or even just speaking their mind, if what they're saying is coming from a place into which they apply it as well, or it's just coming from a place of maybe, bragging, or maybe just a place of, maybe their opinion. So I noticed this when I started a business a few years ago, and I noticed that a lot of times people unintentionally, they coach, and again, it could be unintentional, but they're giving like speeches, and they're trying to almost teach people, again, unintentionally sometimes, just by sharing their mind because they have a good public speaking skill, or maybe they've created some following in some case, and they feel entitled to teach on topics that they do not apply to themselves. So this would be like, for example, a doctor that goes up and starts talking about medicine and whatever, but then kind of deviates the topic, ends up talking about real estate and how he invested his money. That doesn't mean that the doctor is good at real estate just because he made money, but he could start speaking on it, and some people could be influenced by that. So an example that I see a lot more frequently is our family. Just because we grew up around mom and dad, it doesn't mean mom and dad are right about everything, and doesn't mean my uncle's right about everything. And it doesn't mean that because they have an authoritative figure over me that they are actually telling the truth in every case scenario. And I think people are influenced by that a lot more than they should. And again, it's almost like it's a dangerous way to live, but you don't know because you're unaware. It's an uncomfortable way to live when you learn how to do this. Now every time I go somewhere, listen to somebody, I always ask myself, is that person actually credible in what they're saying? If somebody is talking about fitness, the first thing I do is I ask myself, are they applying that advice themselves, or is it just maybe like a past story? Because if somebody's giving me advice on my marriage, but they've got divorced a couple of times, they actually might have something good to say about marriage that they've genuinely learned, but have they applied it to themselves? No. It's a lesson that they learned after being burnt, or maybe it's a lesson that they learned by watching somebody else, but never applied to themselves. Therefore, I should question the teaching, right? And there's so many videos online that you just got to be careful on who you're listening to and why. Like people online that go and say stuff like, well, billionaires do this and this. And then you go to find out that person's never actually talked to a billionaire. And so you look at Alex Hormozi, he does this brilliantly. You look at anybody that's growing and they want to stay in their lane. Alex Hormozi always talks about building a $100 million business. His book's called $100 million offers, $100 million sales, $100 million leads. But he is not talking about $1 billion leads. Why? Because he hasn't built a business worth $1 billion, and he knows that. And he tries to stay very far from advising people on what to do to get to $1 billion. He might say something like, I think this is what it is, but I would check with Warren Buffett. And so I think that a lot of you guys, and especially people reaching out, you're probably in an environment that it could be your manager, even the person you're listening to. Like, you think they're right just because they're speaking and they have the confidence to speak over you, but that does not make them right. And you should always have the way or find a way to professionally question them and not judge and see if they're applying what they're saying. So, and again, like the world is just full of this. I remember I went through cancer when I was 15 years old, and I'm fine now, I'm in remission, but I was 15 years old, I went through cancer, and I remember the doctor that was talking to me that's smoking a cigarette. And I didn't think about that at the time, but now I look at it and I think, well, how can you advise somebody on health when you do not want to apply it to yourself? Is it true advice if you wouldn't want it for yourself? You look at Mark Zuckerberg, or you look at the creator of TikTok, the Chinese guy, and he created TikTok for the world, but does not want his children to use it. So again, I think the world is full of this. You might go somewhere to learn. You want to make sure you know the speaker is talking about something that they know. In Spain, when I used to go to church, I'll give you another example. In the Catholic world, I was grown Catholic. The pastor or the priest is never been married, but they do run all the marriage courses. And now I think about it, and it doesn't make any sense, because marriage is way more than just a commitment from one another or from both people to God. A marriage is every discussion, every conversation, learning how to overcome conflict. There's so many things. Now I listen to a pastor that's been married and overcome 25 years worth of marriage, giving advice on marriage, and I believe what they say to be true because they have the fruit on the tree. And so think about it. A lot of times the frustrations you have come from you following advice from people that have no fruit, and you're trying to fulfill something from an advice that somebody gave that is empty. It's maybe something that they wish they had on themselves, or they're wishing on you because they never got, but it's something they never applied to themselves. And I think it's so crucial that the next time you go to a meeting, the next time you're listening to somebody, the next time you're pulling out your pen to write down notes and learn, the next time you're listening to somebody speak at the table, don't turn on your judgment antenna, but try to really ask yourself, should I accept that as a truth just because they're saying it? Do they apply that to themselves? And also, there's a lot of value in learning how to politely ask that person if they've done it themselves. So somebody's talking about a diet and how they got, how they think, getting skinny works, and maybe I don't see the results right there in person. So I'll ask them, I'm not going to say well, you're fat, because that would be rude. But I'll ask something along the lines of hey, have you seen this work in yourself? Have you personally tested this? I want to make sure that what they're saying is not just bluff. And I think too many people maybe they're afraid of maybe it's confrontation, or maybe they don't want to question it, or maybe they just don't even think about it. I think the major issue is unawareness, but there's so much value in learning how to do that. And when you start listening and applying feedback and learning only from people who do have fruit on the tree, your results will grow, because you're listening to people that are not only speaking, but also walked the walk. And I think that's super, super, super important in business today, where people are talking about sales and they've never done a sale before, or people are talking about money, or people just giving advice on books they've read, but they don't make any money. Therefore, they haven't applied the knowledge from the books that they're speaking of. And there's so much of that. It's so much value in learning how to check the fruit. So hopefully you find some value in that. If you do, please leave a comment below, like, share, and subscribe if you are listening still. And other than that, we'll see you at the next one.